All right, welcome everyone. There's really no reason for me to even attempt to be profound when you're in the company of these incredible four leaders here in both academia and industry. Welcome everyone to our final Innovation Unscripted event of the year, featuring Dr. Ted Love, Dr. Tia Lyles-Williams, and Mr. Brad Hartman in a discussion moderated by Dr. Rahim Bia. My name is Andy Rathbun-Noonan. My pronouns are he, him. I'm the president of the National Science and Technology Medals Foundation. We're a nonprofit devoted to building a more diverse, inclusive, and equitable STEM community. Tonight is night 2 of our Innovation Unscripted event. Show of hands, who was at our networking event last night? Awesome. So we've been doing these events in partnership with Black women in science and engineering. We could not be more grateful for this partnership. They're an unbelievable organization. If you do not know of them or you haven't joined or inquired about them, you should check them out. They're doing incredible work supporting Black women as they persist, traverse, and hopefully thrive in their STEM careers beyond undergrad. In addition to our Innovation Unscripted program that you're all going to be part of tonight, we work closely with Howard University, the University of Texas at Arlington, and California State University East Bay to host our Keystone program that we call InSTEM. InSTEM is a 4-year mentorship experience that works to address the alarming attrition rate of STEM majors from underrepresented groups through substantive access to mentors, socio-emotional support, and the creation of an inclusive community for STEM scholars. I want to thank Georgia Tech, President Cabrera, our panelists and moderator, and all of you for coming tonight. We hope you enjoy the conversation. And if you could please join me in welcoming to the podium Chris Burke, Georgia Tech's Executive Director of Community Relations.
Hey, thanks, Andy. I appreciate it. So first, I want to acknowledge my team in the front row, Taylor, Steph, and Cecilia. You guys wave your hands. So without them, we would not be able to pull events like this together, and I would go off the rails completely. So just to echo what Andy mentioned, I think it's really timely that to host this event here because we all share similar values. And whether that's the National Science and Technology Medals Foundation or Black Women in Science and Engineering, and Georgia Tech, we all have this common value and theme of inclusiveness in STEM. And so how this all kind of came about, I won't go through the whole story, but Erica Jefferson, wave your hand back there. So Erica and I got connected through a mutual friend, which started this conversation that kind of led to this event tonight. And it was really, the team at the foundation was great to work with. Typically when you do events, it's like you get that email, so I would get an email from Joanna. And so those were the emails that I was okay with opening. When you do stuff with people, we've done many events, and too often you get an email from somebody and it's like, oh gosh, I don't want to open this. But Joanna's emails were always very timely and pleasant. So my role here today is to introduce our 12th president, Angel Cabrera. President Cabrera has been here since the fall of 2019. He came to us from George Mason, where he was president for 7 years. Under Cabrera's leadership, GT has had unprecedented growth. And so recently we had 12,000 students this year, which is unprecedented. We had more than 3,000 incoming freshmen, the largest incoming freshman class to date. And it was recently recognized by the state of Georgia as contributing $4.5 billion to the state economy. And what's significant about that is this does not include the startups that are spinning out. This is really our direct contribution, so it's far greater than that. In addition, we are the #1 public research university without a medical school. In 2022, our faculty and staff increased research dollars by 14%, up to $1.45 billion under his leadership. In 2020, he kicked off a strategic planning process that was also very inclusive, where over 5,700 people contributed to that strategic plan. And that strategic plan is really what will lead us into the future as being recognized as a 21st century research university. Cabrera has been named as a Young Global Leader by the World Economic Forum and a Star of Europe by Bloomberg. He's a Henry Crown Fellow by the Aspen Institute and named as a Great Immigrant by the Carnegie Corporation of New York. He served on many national boards and local boards as well here, and most notably, he's an alum. He's one of our very own. And another pretty interesting factoid is Cabrera is the first native of Spain to serve as a president of an American university. So without further ado, I bring to you Georgia Tech's 12th president, Angel Cabrera.
Thank you, and thank you all for showing up. I'm learning new facts about our community today. First, I learned that Erica, the founder of Be Wise, is an alumna of the Scheller College. Woohoo! I love it, and I love it because we, of course, at Georgia Tech, we're working very hard to empower people to be entrepreneurs. And what I want all of our students to know is there are many types of entrepreneurship, including being a social entrepreneur and having an idea and creating an organization like this is a great example. So thank you so much, Erica. Proud of what you're doing to make a difference. I want to thank all the women who are now studying to become in science and technology for showing up, because that's absolutely essential. So on my way in, I met Lauren, who a few years ago showed up at one of the Be Wise conferences, right? And which she was not exactly the target of the conference, because you work more with mid-career women, is that correct? But she showed up anyways. The conference was not for her, but she showed up anyways. Well, guess what? She left the conference with a job. Did I get that right? So, see, step number one, you have to show up. I know I'm preaching to the choir because you did, but well done. So, yeah. I want to thank Eric and Be Wise, and also our partners at the National Science and Technology Medals Foundation for choosing Georgia Tech for your meeting, for help us carry this important mission. This is central for us, for Georgia Tech. When we did this strategic plan that Chris mentioned, probably the hardest thing that we did was to write in a short sentence what Georgia Tech is about. Why do we get up in the morning and come to work, whether you're a student, faculty member, staff, or whether you're a donor and you're investing? And that sentence that took many, many hours to work on every word says, we develop leaders who advance technology and improve the human condition. Leaders who advance technology and improve the human condition. Well, the immediate question that sentence says is, okay, what are the aspects of the human condition that need improving? Well, you have to have everybody at the table in science and technology organizations and labs if you are going to come up with solutions that help everybody. So it is essential for our mission, is essential. This is not a nice to have, it's essential that we continue to convince everybody, people of all backgrounds, to choose careers in science and technology. So Be Wise and the National Science and Technology Medals Foundation, we share your passion for this work. It's essential for us. We think that Atlanta and Georgia in general, but Atlanta in particular, is in a unique place to lead the way, because we have all the various elements that you need to be a place where people of many different backgrounds can do great things in science and technology. We have an incredibly diverse population. Is really amazing, the talent and the diversity of backgrounds that we have in the city. We have the largest technological university in the country, perhaps in the world. We have great opportunities for some of the brightest students anywhere. We have, as you've heard, one of the biggest research portfolios everywhere. So we want to make sure that we use that size, that scale to lead the way in finding ways to empower people, again, of all backgrounds to do great things in science and technology. And we realize we can't do that alone. So we love the fact that we're partnering with you guys. The other thing that we're doing, since most of you share a passion for biotechnology, and I think that's probably the theme of this conference, is we're also working to create spaces within the city that help us create a rich ecosystem of innovation in biotech. Right now, even though we're very, very proud that our biomedical engineering program at Georgia Tech is, I hope I get this right, is ranked either 1 or 2, depending on the year. Well, the dean is here, so I'll say number 1, best ever, yeah. When our faculty or our students create a biotech company, eventually gets bought by someone from Boston and moved out. And we don't like that. So we don't like that. So we are trying to create a space where those companies will grow roots in Atlanta and will create opportunity in Atlanta. Very exciting because we're in the middle of the construction of this. We're creating a new neighborhood called Science Square. Science Square. And this neighborhood, which is very close to our campus, is on the southwest part of our campus, really is creating wet labs and incubation space, and also apartments and restaurants. We're creating a whole neighborhood dedicated to housing new ventures in science and technology. So, to all the students here who are thinking or who are working in getting their careers in science and technology started, if you end up creating a great biotech company, do not move it to Boston, okay? We want you to stay here. We have an amazing, fun, state-of-the-art neighborhood that we're building just for you to stay here and create opportunity here. So with that, I am delighted to introduce, I'm going to call the panel. The panel is going to be led by Dean Rahim Villa. This is the point where you guys, the panelists, are free to come to, I think that's what I'm supposed to do. I don't have a long text about the moderator, but I will tell you that Dean Villa, who is an alum of Georgia Tech and a native of Atlanta, hopefully he subscribes to my sales pitch for Atlanta. He leads one of the top 3, in our minds is the number 1, according to US News, is it the top 3 engineering schools in the country, perhaps the largest school in the country, and he's doing an amazing work to make sure that, again, engineering is open for everybody and that engineering is used to solving problems that improve the lives of everybody. And he's going to be introducing the panel and lead us through this discussion. Thank you all so very much for joining us today.
All right, good evening. Y'all doing all right? We got some great panelists, so y'all got to wake up. Y'all got to make sure that you are asking questions. We're going to give you some time to get to that. But I think we're going to start with intros, and maybe we will go with Dr. Tia. Can you get us started about just sort of your background?
Look, I'm glad I'm going before Ted. I'll say that. But yes, Dr. Tia Lyles-Williams, 22 years working in biotech and biopharma. I started out like many of you, so I'm an alum of Howard University and got my degree in biology. Did many internships in workforce, work study, federal work study programs. Yeah. So I started out doing research, helping out with recruitment for clinical trials at the Howard University Cancer Center. I then went on and did an internship at NIH, and then went on and did an internship that turned into a job by the time I graduated at Walter Reed Army Institute of Research. So that is the naval base, not the hospital that's been transformed into J-Labs. And then I got my feet wet into big pharma by going to work for Human Genome Sciences, which is now GSK. I actually have a chronic condition myself, so I took a couple years off. You know how Black parents are when their kids get sick at any age, so they make them come home. So I came home for a year, and then I left. My dad was very upset at the time, and followed my friends out to LA. And so I moonlighted a little bit in the music and film industry and have seen my friends blossom. And then as soon as the doctor gave me the clearance, I ran back to biotech and restarted my career at Amgen for a year, and then went to Baxter, which you guys know here in Covington as Takeda, for a couple years. And then I went to what I call my first contract drug manufacturer, a CDMO. So these are folks that make drugs on contract for big pharma, out in Tustin, California, called Abbott, Bioservices. And then I went to Lonza in New Hampshire for a year. And then I went to Jazz Pharmaceuticals, which was my first virtual biotech employee that I worked for. And then I got tired, and we'll get into that as you ask questions, and started my own thing. So I'm a 3-time biotech startup founder. So I have my own CDMO. We're building an 80,000 square foot manufacturing facility in Philadelphia. I have an accelerator program for underserved founders that we're getting ready to roll out in partnership with BWise called Hive Bio, but the company name is Heliplex. And then most recently, I've started a drug development company based off genomics, AI, ML called Jackson Taylor Therapeutics. And we've raised $2.5 million for their first company. I always neglect to say that. So I want to say that because Ted about to blow me out.
So Tia is very modest. Obviously a brilliant career, and you're hard to follow. Not only are you eloquent, but you speak very quickly, so you get a lot of information in.
Thank you.
So I'm Ted Love. I'm a physician scientist by training. Actually grew up over in Huntsville, a couple of 100 miles from here. Went to Philadelphia for college at a little college called Haverford, and then did my medical training at Yale, and then my subsequent training at the MGH at Harvard. I actually had no interest in going into biotech. My mentor at Harvard got recruited to become president of R&D at Bristol Myers Squibb. He wanted me to follow him, but I decided, I should take it on my own maybe. And I went to a little company back then called Genentech. And it was a good decision for me because the company didn't have a cardiologist, and I was a cardiologist. I was the only cardiologist in the company. And I worked on initially the stuff that were cardiovascular programs, but as I got promoted, I became head of all drug development for the company. I got involved in starting a company called Theravance, which is still around today, and did another company, my first CEO job, called HiSeq, which we turned in Novello, which did really, really well. But then ultimately, we had one drug and failed in phase 3, so we lost $1 billion of market cap in one day. We had to kind of retool the company, and I retired. Came out of retirement to help a company called Onyx to get a drug approved for multiple myeloma. I did that significantly because my mother died of multiple myeloma, and so did the mentor at Harvard that had been head of R&D at Bristol Myers Squibb. Probably my most important thing I've done in my career is I came out of retirement a second time to build a company called Global Therapeutics, which focused on sickle cell disease. That's all we did was sickle cell disease. I did raise a lot of money. I raised about $1.5 billion, spent about $1 billion of it on sickle cell disease. We made a great therapy. Pfizer bought the company for about $6 billion, and they're making the drug available around the world. And we had a second generation drug, which I think is going to be curative, effectively curative of sickle cell disease, if we can get doctors to prescribe it to everyone, and everyone takes it, even as an infant. I think we would have a formulation available to stop the disease from advancing when you're a baby, when you're an infant, so that you could be healthy your whole life. And now I'm retired again. I'm not going to go back to work. I'm chairman of BIO, which is the advocacy, the organization that represents the big companies like Pfizer's and the Merck's, but we also represent the small companies like Tia's company and like GPT was.
Brad.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's a real privilege to be here. My kind of career story is an interesting one. My degree is in neuroscience, and I work in the field of human capital. I'm a chief people officer at B. I kind of graduated from school. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. I had spent some time at the National Cancer Institute in the graduate school doing research, and so I had skills at the bench. I just knew I didn't want to stay at the bench for my career. And, like many folks, I think at the time, there weren't a lot of career services groups that were talking about biotech and that were talking about the different careers in biotech. And so I was like, what am I going to do with a science degree if I don't want to go get a PhD? And so I'll come out into the industry. So I moved to Boston. I started interviewing with some companies. And I ran into a recruiting firm where all of their recruiters were former scientists. And they said, what about recruiting? And I said, Army recruiting? What are you talking about? Like, no. And they said, no, what about biotech recruiting? And, you can come work for us. You can learn about, there's about a couple hundred functions involved in taking a drug from early research all the way through commercialization. You'll get to work with 30 different companies across multiple therapeutic areas. And then you can go get your business degree, because my brother had graduated from an MBA program, so I thought I wanted to get an MBA and then go work at BCG or McKinsey or something like that. And so I was like, all right, this sounds great. I'll go build some business skills. And along the way, what I learned is that not only is science and business, but science, business, and people are really the third element. One of the reasons I wanted to get my PhD is that I wanted to teach. And who's the learning function within an organization but HR? And so I was really blessed early on. I had a client who was at a late stage rare disease company called Dyax at the time. They worked on this technology called phage display. And they were working in an area called hereditary angioedema, and she gave me an opportunity to break in there to be their head of recruiting, but to start to learn other areas of HR. And I did that, moved over to Vertex a couple of years later after we launched our first therapy, and helped to launch their first 2 drugs, one in hepatitis C and one in cystic fibrosis. But I had this conundrum of, do I want to be an entrepreneur? And when I had left the recruiting agency I worked in, I kind of had plans that I was going to open up my own shop. And so I was at the stage where I was like, do I want to get an MBA? Do I want to go grow in HR? Or do I want to become an entrepreneur? And I spent a lot of time thinking about it, did a million different decision trees around it. But the entrepreneurial part seemed to be, because I was about to get married and thinking about kids, the part that I needed to figure out, because it was time bound. I was either going to do it then or I was going to do it when I was 55. So I opened up my own recruiting agency. I hung my own shingle, put my own capital to work at that, which was an interesting thing. And we grew it. So the firm grew from myself and a business partner to over 12 recruiters, a couple $1 million in revenue. We became one of the top recruiting firms for Biogen IDEC. But my life changed dramatically over that time. My father got diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. We moved up our time to have kids. Thankfully, he met my son, saw his first birthday. We moved up the timeline for our second kid, who unfortunately he didn't meet. And when he passed, I had an opportunity through a mentor of mine to join a CAR T, a second-generation CAR T firm that we felt like could potentially cure cancer. And I left all of the equity in my company. And as a kid who moved to Boston with $400 in his pocket, that was a pretty difficult thing to go join this organization that did not become the next Kite or Juno, but we did get to the clinic, we did get public, and we did actually cure a number of patients of DLBCL, and is amazingly meaningful. And so since then, I've continued to work in different public and private biotechs. I've worked at 2 Series A startups. One I was the 17th employee of. The company I'm at right now at B Biopharma, I was the 20th employee of. And for those that are out there thinking about careers outside the lab, I will put a plug. I always question whether human resources was the place where if you were really bright, if you were really motivated, if you were really a high performer, would you go to work in HR? And all I will say is, it is the future of organizations. You are a chief productivity officer. You are not a chief people officer. And it's a really meaningful thing that I get to do. I get to go in and help 1 + 1 = 5 every day, which my son says, Brad, you don't know how to do math, so maybe I need to come down to the School of Engineering. So I hope I can learn something.
That's funny. My son just told me 2 days ago, who's 10, that he didn't want me checking his math homework because I was not a professional. True story. And just, yeah, whenever you think you've made it, your kids will humble you very quickly.
Over and over.
Over and over. No, that's right. That's right. So you each talked about entrepreneurship, and you've done it or you're doing it. And so tell us the most significant challenge, one of the most significant challenges that you face in the entrepreneurship journey.
I would say outside of the obvious of being a person of color and fundraising for millions of dollars, I think one of the most things that is not talked about entrepreneurship is how your family look at you and say, when are you going to get a better paying job? Because when you raise some of this money, in the case like I did with 2.5, that doesn't go in your pocket, or what Ted just explained. It don't necessarily go in your pocket, right? So it's not like I'm going to be like P. Diddy and go buy a house and a car, or like an athlete and show it off. I come out my regular clothes the next day, get on the computer, go to my meetings or travel, what I have to do, and you're right back at the bottom. So it's like as soon as you get one win, I think I told some of you guys this yesterday at the networking event, you want to just be present. So that's one of the things I've learned. Like, you have to block out the naysayers and be very present with each win, each incremental win you get. Be present, and whatever email, whatever text, or whatever you get the minute after you get the winning call or winning notification, leave it for tomorrow.
So a little bit of what you already mentioned, Tia. I would say the biggest challenge is the uncertainty of being out there where nobody else is. Because if you're really innovating, by definition, nobody has done this. And you're out there. And a lot of people are going to say, this is not going to work. A lot of people are going to say, you're crazy. People would even say, you're going to hurt people trying to do what you're doing. And so you really have to have confidence. But I would also say you have to have the capacity to really be willing to say, maybe I am wrong. And kind of re-examine whether or not, your confidence in what you're doing is justified. And if it is, you just keep going and you keep incrementally proving to people that you're right. And over time, if you're right, you'll succeed. But it's very tough initially being out there alone with people throwing darts at your ideas.
Yeah, I would say for me, I think, sometimes it's letting go of that idea. When I made the decision to step away from the business that I had built through blood, sweat, and tears for a number of years, that was something I spent a lot of time thinking about. Because if you build a service-based business, when you go to sell it, it's called an earn-out deal. You have to stay for another 4 years to effectively kind of get that liquidity. And, so it was a real question about, what's the type of father I want to be, what's the type of partner I want to be, and what do I want my life to be at that particular stage. And after you put all that blood, sweat, and tears and you've gotten to that place where you've built a successful enterprise, that decision of, do I really want to walk, right? Because there is a cost. And there's both a cost sort of as you enter into that space, and then there's a cost on the other side. And, you can talk about it theoretically. I think when you're put in that position, as my coach says, all decisions are values clarifications. And, I think for me, I never grew up saying it's about, can I grow the business to another $1 million the next year? It was really about, can I be a good human being? And, that's one of the things that I loved about what y'all said in terms of the mission for Georgia, in terms of being an inspired human leader. Because one of the other things I've learned is that what's internal becomes external. And so if you can sort of take whatever that value is that you have and bring it into the world, like that in and of itself is one of the biggest gifts. So I think those are some things that came away from me.
Oh, that's great. I'll chime in here too. So I started a company about 6+ years ago with one of my PhD students, and as we were talking earlier, Tia, it is one of the hardest things that, I've written almost 200 papers. We know how to do that, but when we went to try to go and build something that actually worked, by the way, and worked for a long time, not just enough to get some data for your paper.
No participation certificates for that, right?
Right. No, it actually has to work, and it was tough. And I tell you, over the last 6 years, it's sort of a roller coaster of, we're about to pop bottles and buy, fly private and buy our own jets, and then, a week later, oh man, we got to close the door. And that's what it's been for the last 6 years or so. So it's tough. It's a really difficult experience. So we just heard about some of the pioneers for mRNA. They just received the Nobel Prize in medicine. And so love to hear, and I'm going to start with Brad on this one. I'm not going to do you like that, Tia.
Thank you.
So love to hear your thoughts on that, but also just how your field has sort of shifted since the pandemic or post-pandemic.
Yeah, I think that it's really been shifting over the last 10 years. We have this really interesting confluence we have new modalities, and the mRNA drugs are an example of this era of cell and gene therapy that's coming into the world. And so for a long time, up until we had Genentech, we had the world of small molecules, and then that really ushered in a really amazing way this era of biologics. And it's not that those things are going away, because they're very valuable, and there will continue to be really breakthrough medicines in both of those classes. But we have breakthrough into these new modalities that have come out. We also have more powerful systems to prosecute things through automation and big data and informatics, right? And so we've seen huge leaps forward in computers. And then, you also put that through, I think we're also learning how to manage and to build and to run companies and to do things like clinical trials in even more targeted and thoughtful and meaningful ways. And what I'm really hopeful for is that I think these kind of segments or those different factors I just elucidated are going to lead to incredible disruptive innovation over the next little bit. And so I'm very hopeful for what will happen for medicine, what will happen for patients. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for the industry, for regulators, for individuals within the supply chain or sort of the commercialization components to really be incredibly different in the way that we design and develop and bring therapies to markets and what that's going to mean for the world. So I'm excited about it, and I think the people who are sitting in this room are going to be the ones that actually end up doing it. So keep doing what you're doing, and we'll try not to steal a lot of you to Boston.
Well, I think the wonderful thing about the mRNA Nobel Prize winners is they kind of proved to people that the success we had with COVID vaccine was kind of almost presented as an overnight success. Well, it was actually 20 years in the making. These people worked on this stuff for a couple of decades, and they really positioned Moderna and Pfizer to ultimately step in and build on their work. So I'm head of bio, and one of the points I have to make is that, we have an ecosystem for science, and that ecosystem really does start in our great universities of engineering, of medicine. That's where it starts. And the motivation and interest there is, quite frankly, often not directed toward anything other than understanding the issues. In our industry, we have to, we eat what we kill. And if we don't kill anything, we don't eat. So we are for a profit industry, and so we invest massively. I mean, as I said, my little company became the biggest investor in sickle cell disease in the world, bar none. There was no government, including the United States government, spending the money on sickle cell that we spent. But we were building on the science that had been going on in academia for years and years and years. So we weren't an overnight success either. We were building on the work and on the strength and, quite frankly, the achievements of people in front of us. It's an ecosystem. Nobody does anything along in this business. We're all high reliant on each other to be successful.
Yep, I'm glad you went first on that one with you guys. It brings me to my point. So it's good that you talk about that we're in an ecosystem, right? And we got all these years of dedication of science to get to this point with mRNA and cell therapy and gene therapy and all the different vectors and things that come with it. But one of the things we're missing in the ecosystem is the equity in that ecosystem, right? So we're kind of putting the cart before the horse, right? I know last year you guys probably read the headlines that the human genome has been completed, right? I told you I worked at Human Genome Sciences, so they was all hoorah at that time when I worked there during those years. But the biggest secret is that that human genome is 99.9% Caucasian male. So we're building these gene vectors, we're building these different drugs, we're getting into AI and machine learning off a library that does not represent not only us in the United States, it don't represent you in this room, it don't represent the people around the globe, right? Which brings us back to where we're at with some of these medications, especially those medications that are being developed for diseases that most adversely affect people of color, of not being truly efficacious, right? There's a reason as a diabetic that you gotta take the cholesterol and the cardiovascular medication and all these different things. I notice I have this in my family, prevalent, right? But when you get to the point and do something what Ted built for sickle cell and build upon that technology to the point where it actually works, and he has a second iteration to make it work better, that's where we need to get with the mRNA and the cell therapy and gene therapy. So we gotta have folks like you that are willing to take the risk, right? Whether you're a software engineer, whether you're in the science part of drug development, whether you're in business, whether you're in finance, right? It's one thing for us to build this thing, for example, what I'm building, which is the genomic biobank with AI machine learning, and we're going after to build a human genome for people of color, right? We're unique at doing that, but it's not going to have any impact if I don't have the business people and the right finance people to convince investors to put money into that machine, right? The product is never going to get out there. So just something to think about as we're talking about gene therapy and ecosystem. We have to figure out a way to integrate the equity piece a lot faster than what we're doing.
Right.
Can I maybe just add something to that?
Yeah, actually, no. So I was going to go to you next because you jumped ahead and stole my next question.
Sorry.
This is how good she is. She's like, you know what? I'm going to go ahead to the next question. But the health disparities, equity, super important, super critical. There's not a lot of representation in clinical trials, and all sorts of problems are created, and that will be amplified with big data and generative AI and all that stuff. It's going to be amplified. But so Ted, you've been in this space for decades, and I told you earlier that I watched a video and got some comments that you said, and I know you're the expert in this space. So tell me about that.
I mean, I'm not sure if I'm an expert, but I do have a life experience, which has been. Which touches on many of the things I think Tia said. So I grew up on a farm in Alabama. There were 8 kids, 2 parents, lived in a very small, like 800 square foot house. We were poor. My parents were not highly educated. My father had a 4th grade education and my mother had a 6th grade education, but they were very amazing parents. I mean, they were wonderful parents. But Tia, I got to tell you, this is kind of depressing to say, but it actually helped me. My parents said to me, you're going to have to work twice as hard to get half as much. Same. Because that was kind of the world that they knew. So when I went off to Haverford, when I was at Yale, when I was at the Mass General, and throughout my career, I've kind of had, honestly, the expectation that I've got to be extremely good. Extremely good. And I was always unwilling to be paid half as much. And if you tried to pay me half as much, I had proven to you that I'm extremely good, and I would walk. And most people couldn't tolerate that, so they paid me. So I think, it is, what everything that Tia said is right. And my encouragement to people, again, I had to say this to myself, is I can get mad about it or I can get busy. And I focused on getting busy and really leaving no doubt in the room that I was the most qualified. If you were coming into the Mass General with an MI, I was extremely qualified to do everything we need to do to save your life. And that was kind of how I was able to compete in an environment which Tia, you're absolutely right, which was very excited to give me less and not recognize me as much. You just had to fight through it. And I tell my kids, life isn't necessarily fair, but we have to do well. And if we're gonna do well, you gotta get very busy. It's not fair, but I'm just being real.
Yeah, absolutely. Brad, you are in the people business.
Yeah, and the truth is, as T's mentioning, we got a lot of work to do. And it's also related to that internal to external, right? Until as a society we can actually change some of this to move it forward. But to Ted's point, how it's going to happen is through effort. And so one of the things that look, I come at this issue from a place of humility as a person with white male privilege, is to say, look, that it is important that we actually can take meaningful action, not just sort of say that this matters because diverse teams produce a better economic result. It's not about a productivity outcome that I do this for. It's because it's just the right damn thing to do, right? It's a values-based component, right? And so, at the end of the day, we're really proud. We got to work with BWise on creating this program at my firm. By the way, you're all thinking about starting your own business. You can do this as a small entity, right? Because there's lots of large companies out there that have really big groups around diversity, and that's great. They should. I'm glad that they do. I'm glad this topic is kind of becoming more popular around people in my profession. But what I would say is, we had a 2-person people team, and we said, you know what, we're going to create a Boston-wide program to help individuals who are minorities, women, individuals with disabilities, members of the LGBTQ+ community, accelerate their career development to get onto more senior leadership teams and onto boards. And how do we do that? It's not enough for us to do it inside of our own walls. We want to do it around the community. And so it was just hand-to-hand combat of reaching out to HR directors, talking to people about it, working with individuals to help develop a leadership development curricula, and then building it. In the last 3 years, we've had 60 people go through the program, and Erica's been really generous in donating her time to help actually coach mentors on managing across difference. So that they can be an even more effective mentor. And that's the hard thing, I think, is sometimes we try to figure out, well, where do we start? What do we do? And we often focus on metrics, and they're important, but I think we need to start with values. And I think we need to connect that to, we all can take individual action. And if we do that, we had Edie Glaude Jr., who's the head of African American Studies, come to our company to talk about the history of racism and the continued history of racism in America. And one of the things he said is if everybody in this country did one intentional act, 300 million people doing an intentional act to move us forward, it would be like taking drops of rainwater and breaking through a dam that basically had held us back in terms of that. And so, you don't necessarily always know where to start, but you can take a step. You can take a step on getting busy, and I think we can all take that step.
Yeah, that's right. I love the confidence and the courage to acknowledge the privilege. And, a lot of folks are just like, oh, they can't do that. And, I sit and I look at like my male privilege, and, have I had it easier on average than my black female colleagues in academia? Yeah. Sure, right? But that doesn't mean that I didn't work hard. And I think that's the issue where you have such a large group of people that when they hear the word privilege, it's like, oh, God, you're taking away from me. No, nobody's saying that, dude. Nobody. I mean, you worked hard. But let's admit that there are systemic isms all throughout this country and many countries, but that doesn't take away from you working hard and contributing. And I think if we can get people past that, we can do so much more. Ted, I want to ask you, so I just started reading this book, like half a day ago, so I probably shouldn't even talk about this, but it's to your point about working twice as hard, which I know you've been told, I've been told, Tia's been told, Dr. K, my good friend right there, the Dean of Ivan Allen, Liberal Arts, she's been told. And so the book basically addresses that, and it's called Weathering. And it's a professor out of Michigan who is in the National Academy of Medicine, and she basically argues that itself is part of what contributes to lower life expectancy and outcomes. Of course, there are lots of other things in the medical system, but you're the MD. Thoughts on that?
I think it's possible. One of the reasons that my wife was so adamant that I retire is because I work incessantly. And she feels that it probably is shortening my life expectancy, and it's probably true. After I retired, my brother died suddenly, and my physician got very, nervous about my health. Even though I look healthy, I run, I'm very athletic, I work out every day. And so we started examining my coronary arteries, and it turns out I have pretty bad coronary disease. Never had heart attack, never had any chest pain. So now I'm on like an ultra aggressive regimen to try to clean up my coronary arteries. Now, is that the case because of my work-life balance? Because I was going to mention this earlier. That's one of the other things about building companies is that your work-life balance often the balance is not there. It's just work. And you live, but it's really work, and it does take that. Can I make just one story? Because I think sometimes anecdotes are important to people in terms of really understanding what's going on. Brad is a rock star. I was talking to Brad before we came, and just how he thinks about things and thinks about the business and how people are critical to business, and business is just wonderful. B is very lucky. When I was a student at Haverford, I was a freshman. This was 1978. The Bakke case was before the Supreme Court, and most of you probably don't know what the Bakke case is, but it was an affirmative action case around a white man named Bakke who had applied to UC Davis Medical School, and he didn't get in. And he alleged that he didn't get in because the school was letting black kids in who had lower MCATs and lower GPAs. And in fact, that was true. But there were also white kids that had been admitted with lower MCATs and scores. Anyway, we argued about this every night, and I'll get to the punchline. This went on for a whole semester. And at the end of the semester, one of my friends got up and walked across the room because I'd been the only person arguing that whole semester in favor of affirmative action. And when this kid walked over, one of the other kids in the room said, "It's easy for you to decide with Ted tonight, but how are you going to feel in 5 years or in 4 years when he gets your position in medical school?" And nobody even realized what they said. But I immediately caught on what was said, and I said, "This is what this is really all about. This is about you thinking that these positions in medical school are yours, and the only way I can get them is to take it from you. That's not what this is about. This is about a world where we are trying to get the best and the brightest in the seat, in the job, irrespective, and discrimination has actually been preventing that. So I'm here to tell you that position in medical school has nobody's name on it, and I'm gonna get it." and that's how I approached it. I mean, but it does point out subliminally. Nobody would have said it's about white privilege.
Yeah.
But when that person stood up and said that, and nobody thought there was a problem with what he said, it became very clear what this was all about. And that is one of our big issues in this country. Nobody wants to admit what really is driving people's behavior.
Well, I would go a step even further to say that, with the recent ruling from the Harvard, sort of decision that has come down, the reality is it's not a land of equal opportunity. And so the truth is that we need to be looking at differences in opportunity when we calibrate. And by not looking at differences of opportunity and just saying, well, we're going to create a level playing field in terms of these qualitative or quantitative factors that are there, it's not a level playing field, right? So it's kind of a stacked deck to begin with. Yeah. And unless we actually reach in and say, we are going to change the deck. And so for me, I think that is the one of the biggest cruxes of the problem is that we are, one, taking a massive step back. I hope organizations are able to kind of fight through that. Because when we do there was a study done out in California looking at if we blind resumes, it actually decreases diversity, right? And so we should be taking that into account if we're trying to really build truly diverse, just not only companies, but a just society and world. So I think that we need to be doing more, not less.
Awesome. So we're going to go to the audience in about 2 or 3 minutes, but I want to quickly get a response from you all about mentoring. How have mentors played in your life and help you be successful?
For me, I still have a lot of mentors. My first mentor in Big Pharma when I worked at Human Genome is now GSK. It works with me, one of my starters right now. So it's been a huge influence in my career and in my life, and I give back the same way. So I actually have a text group. Shout out to the Heliplex folks when you watch this. But we have a text group right now where we update each other on what we're doing. We encourage each other. I repost their wins. They repost my wins. I submit them things like this if they're in town to come to these types of events. I think, especially as a person of color and a person of the LGBTQ community is all we have, right, to get through some of the things that we get through as far as whether it's employment, educational, personal life. You have to have that community. That's what drives you, right? That's what keeps you going. When you have that bad day or that bad moment, you have that person or that group or whoever that you can turn to kind of gas you back up and push you back outside.
I've always had mentors. I will tell you, I've never had an African-American mentor. In the environments that I was in, there was never an African-American, the step above me. But there were extraordinary people that cared about me and my development, and I just latched onto them. I didn't care what they looked like. And they were amazing, and they were transformative in my career. So I think mentorship is huge. But I would also just tell people that when you're looking for mentors, they don't have to be of your gender. I don't think they don't have to be of your race. You're limiting yourself. And in fact, you can have many mentors. But I do think it's important to have people who can reinforce, even when you're right, even when I thought I knew the answer, having somebody who had been there and done that, reaffirmed for me that I was on the right track was very useful.
Yeah, I was really lucky and blessed. Early in my career when I moved into HR in-house, I took an opportunity to go to a Mass Bio event on building best teams. And there was an African-American woman who was the chief people officer at Vertex, who was one of the panelists, and she was just amazingly bright. She was also just an amazing human being. And I walked up to her afterwards and said, "You're ridiculously cool. Can I buy you breakfast?" And she was like, "You asked some really cool questions. Can I buy you breakfast?" And we ended up, I just joined this company at Diax. I had no intention of leaving my current organization. And she decided to sit down, grab breakfast with me, and I asked her if I could grab breakfast with her for every 6 months. I was like, I just want to have an opportunity to learn from you. And she was willing to give me that time. And I was willing to ask her for it, not just to kind of settle for, hey, we had this cool initial first meeting. And we didn't get to meet every 6 months, but I'd kind of bug her assistant and kind of find ways when they had good clinical trial results or a press release to kind of say, hey, congratulations, and stay in touch. And 3 years later, she ended up actually hiring me at Vertex when we went to build our divisions. And I wasn't looking for a job when she came forward with that. And so she was also the person that connected me to that CAR T company when I made a decision to leave my firm. And was the person that advocated for me, because the truth is I really didn't have the skills or experiences on paper to qualify for that job. Right, and I got that opportunity through her because she said, you know what, I'm going to sponsor Brad. I'm going to tell you he's going to be able to do this, and you're not going to regret making the hire. And so I'm really grateful to her, and I would tell you, get your own personal board of directors. You're going to have to change it throughout your career, but you got to seek that out because those types of people can make you smarter, better, faster, and they can also just shape your life and your career in ways that then you can become, right? Because there's so much value in giving, and so those are some of the lessons.
Awesome. So last scripted question before we go to the audience. So advice to your younger self about biotech startup stuff, about life, about whatever. But advice to your younger self.
I would just say be patient. I know as nerds, we run, and you're trying to achieve that next thing and keep getting that A+ or go after that opportunity, and that's all good. But you do have to be patient because you only can control what you put in. Right, you can't necessarily control what comes out of what you put into that situation.
So a wise person told me a number of years ago I should think about living my life in thirds. The first third of my life is focused on preparation, education, developing skills to go out and do something. And the middle third, you go out and you do something. And if you do something really tremendous, the last third of your life could be focused on philanthropy. And it's not just your money. It could be your time. It could be your effort. I was interviewed for a podcast recently, and I said if I could give my younger self advice, I think I would be more philanthropic earlier in my life because, I think I was just too conservative in terms of giving, and that could have been a way that I could have helped the world even more when I was younger.
We can help you with that here at Georgia Tech.
Well, I was going to say, don't
You open the door. Yeah,
you was at a different time, right? So if you weren't a bit more selfish during your time, you wouldn't be here right now as Dr. Ted Love. So, it all.
She always gives me props.
Yes.
Thank you.
My guy.
Yeah, I would say two things. I would talk about self-compassion, which I didn't really have. I never felt good enough when I was a kid growing up and also when I moved to college. And so I was my own worst critic, which actually served me extremely well until it didn't. I'm a recovered alcoholic, which I don't say to impress you, but to impress upon you. The second part of that, which is that life's greatest teachers may come in places you don't expect. And it turns out that part of not only my mission now, which is really around love and service, And my humanity and the expression of that humanity comes because I was trained to live life by a room full of drunks. And so you don't tend to necessarily go into those types of places to learn from people, but you'd be amazed what those individuals can teach you. And they taught me self-compassion. And that's been an unbelievably transformative set of not only skills, but helped me on my leadership journey from where I was to where I am today. And I'm really, I actually say now I'm a grateful alcoholic, which sounds really weird. But the truth is that I wouldn't change it for the world. And I'm so glad about it. So thank you.
Congratulations, too.
Thank
you. All right, so I gave y'all 5 minutes to think about questions. So it's your time now, audience. Yeah, right here.
Hi, my name is Justice, and I just want to say thank you all for being here. This is really enlightening, and I really do appreciate it. And so you've mentioned a lot about failure, and I was wondering, what does your recovery process look like after you fail and you feel like you've kind of hit rock bottom, and what do you do? How do you keep going?
I generally lament and pout and cry. I'll when I was, I'm a cardiologist, so I did a lot of procedures on patients, many times when they were already been, pretty much declared dead, and you were trying to bring them back, or we had a very serious problem, and I was operating on them. So occasionally patients would die under my care, and sometimes they'd be someone that you had just been talking to, and you had every confidence that they would get through that procedure, and they didn't. That was very painful. And I really did feel like I should grieve about that. I should feel depressed. But I had to get over it because I had to come back to work and do it the next day. And my jobs are not much different. As CEO, it's not much different. So I try to make sure that I do just, the humanity of failure is real. And you have to acknowledge it, and you grieve, but you have to get over it. And I do think kind of acknowledging it and dealing with it is part of getting through it.
Yeah, I think I would say, one of the things you have to learn, or I learned the hard way, I should say, is that the world is conspiring to help you. If you adopt that attitude, and not in a Pollyannish way, but, I grew up in a difficult home, and it actually caused me to eventually become depressed and probably contributed to the alcoholism that I just mentioned to you. And for a long time, I kind of held a lot of resentment towards myself for that. And when I was able to kind of step back, the truth is it also drove me. It drove me to be a four-sport athlete in high school, to play college football, to sing at Carnegie Hall, to do all these different things. My escape was achievement, right? And it worked until it didn't. And that I had to pick myself up after those other places and say, hey, how do I continue to go forward? I left my business to be a better father and a husband. My marriage didn't work out at the end of that. And there are things that I could have done differently in that part of the relationship. And so you look at it and you're like, oh, another big growth opportunity. It's not like you take that bowl of like hardship and you're like, yumbo, this is great. But the truth is it's there to serve you if you let it. So the key for me on that piece of like when it happens is you're gonna be upset. You're gonna have to grieve. You're gonna have to go through your anger, your depression, and eventually your acceptance of whatever that situation is. Because the truth is, whatever you're going through, first of all, there are so many other people that are also going through similar or frankly even worse things. And if you can surround yourself by people who actually can reach out and connect with you in those moments, like that community can be like the eye of the hurricane for you. And it can help you to kind of get through that process, but you can also adopt a mindset that whatever it is you're going through, it's there to serve you if you let it. Because the truth is, otherwise it's just causing you pain. It's like Buddhist non-attachment, right? It's really easy to do that when it's like, a cup of coffee that you spilled. It's really hard to do that when it's your entire enterprise as an entrepreneur that you built. So I say that with like a degree of humility, but the truth is like that mindset and those principles of surround yourself with community, lean into it, and it's not as bad.
I would say, first and foremost, if you're going to get into this game of whether it's entrepreneurship or employment in corporate America, whatever industry you choose, you got to get some tools, right? Failure's going to come. You're going to get mad, cry. You may indulge in whatever you like to indulge in. But if you have the right tools, you're able to mitigate that and have a timeline on how long you grieve on that failure, right? So get a therapist. I have a therapist. I've had a therapist for a very long time. I like listening to music. Like, you have to find your routine, right? So every morning, I kind of train my brain for that, if that makes any sense, right? Every morning I get up, I meditate between 3 to 10 minutes, depending on how I feel that morning, which session I want to do on the Balance app. Yes, I use the app. I don't talk to nobody for real. Or listen to nobody for real. And then from there, I listen to these different motivational podcasts, right? Whether it be a sermon from my pastor from my church that I still participate in from LA, or different podcasts like Coach Payne and all those things that kind of just get mentally fit for the day or mentally fit for the week. And then when that failure comes, as we're talking about, then I already know, okay, Tia, go ahead, have your little attitude. My mom is in the audience, my sister is here, and they sit in the back. Sometimes they'll call me in the middle of that, going through that failure. They'll be like, oh, okay, we'll just call you. Just call you back, or call us back. My mom will say, call me back when you have a better attitude. Call me back when you have a better attitude. And then I call her back, and I'm good to go, right? So you just got to figure out your mode of action, and again, come up with a strategy or a routine so that grief process is relatively limited or short, so you can get on with the next step.
I'll chime in too, and really kind of combine part of what Brad and what Tia said. Self-compassion, right? Self-compassion, and so it is extremely important to talk to yourself as you would talk to a friend, right? You just failed. Man, it's all right because of A, B, C, and D. And often we're so much more hard on ourselves than our friends. So you want to be self-compassionate. Maybe one of the meditations that you do that morning or that evening is the self-compassion meditation. And so I do mindfulness meditation the same every day and every night. And it varies depending on the mood I'm in. What type of day that I have, what type of day that I want to have. But self-compassion. You got to treat yourself as well as you treat your friends.
Hi, I'm Mimi. I'm a second-year PhD student in biomedical engineering with the joint program at Tech and Emory. First, thank you guys for your vulnerability. It just really helps us as seeing your humanness, and just really helps be even more inspiring. I just wanted to ask a question. You guys had all mentioned the high-pressure situations, especially Dr. Love talking about when people are throwing darts at your ideas, having the humility if you're wrong, but if you're right, having the confidence to push through. So how do you balance that as far as with imposter syndrome, or especially if you're coming from an inner city or something, the way you communicate your ideas may not be the same as your peers that do not look like what you look like. So how do you balance having humility with also having the confidence if there may be imposter syndrome as well?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would say first, I think the first thing you want to make sure that you do is that you listen more than you talk. All right, that's one of the things I had to learn, because when you're a high performing, right, highly educated, A-type personality, as they like to call us, sometimes we talk more than we listen. But if you listen more and hear what they're actually saying, it's not about you just being polite and being humble, all that, but it's also giving you extra time to form your response, right? So I give you an example. In my early career, somebody gave me some feedback. I'd be so quick to react, right? What are you talking about? Right? You constantly, you're just ready to defend yourself, right? And then over time with mentorship and all the things that I acquired in my skill set, I learned to listen first, kind of like how you see me up here doing today. I know Erica probably Tia, you ain't really say too much today. But I listen so I have time to form my responses and actually think, and also more importantly, give me time to see it from their perspective, right? Sometimes, especially when it comes to cultural differences with race and all the things we have to deal with on top of, I guess you would call it what, stereotypes and professional and all these different things we have going on when you interact with a person, especially in corporate America or in entrepreneurship, you always want to make sure that you have a glimpse of where they're coming from. So that way, when you give your response or managing it, right, not necessarily talking to somebody, but moving forward after that conversation, after that event, you can kind of have some adjustment, right, to say, look, I know this is how I feel, but I heard what they said, so maybe I can incorporate one of the 20 things that they told me today. I may not like it, but it makes sense, right? Same way with entrepreneurship when you fail fast, right? I was talking to somebody about this earlier. You can come up with a great product, right? You may think that'd be the answer. It may really be the actual answer, right? But if you don't get the perspective of the customer of what they want or what they feel is better between your product versus the product that may already be on the market that everybody uses them every day for whatever reason, then you're not going to be able to get through that window to make it make sense for that adaptation, or get through that window if you're talking to somebody to actually persuade them to come around on what you think is right and what you're trying to do.
So I'm a very analytical person because I think how people deal with things is going to vary depending on who you are. I'm very analytical. So when I'm dealing with things, I like to figure out what's really going on. So for example, if I fail at something, I really try to ultimately figure out why did I fail. And that's very useful for a couple of reasons. But one big reason is that if I go back at it again, I'm going at it with real confidence that the thing that was a problem last time, I've got it covered, or there's no way to cover that. So analysis is very important to me. We were talking earlier, support. I've had enormous support from my wife, from my family growing up. Everything that's taking me down, I go home and I get my batteries recharged. And without that, honestly, I don't think I would have been able to get through a lot of the stuff that I've gotten through. So a support network for me has been phenomenal. And then the other thing I was going to just mention is a framework. Again, maybe it's my analytical personality, but my father told me early on, because I went to all black schools for the first 6 years of my life. They're not integrated. And then when the schools were integrated, my black teacher said, "You're not going to be the smartest in the class next year." And I just accepted it, as going to be true. And it turned out there was no big challenge the next year when the schools were integrated. But really what my dad said to me was most important. He said, "You're not better than anyone, but nobody is any better than you are." So that framework kind of keeps you balanced. I really always understood that I was no more valuable, no more important than the janitor cleaning the hospital. The hospital doesn't work without all of us. I was that way about the company. I was also very clear that when I walked into a room and there were people who thought they could put me down, I wasn't going to be budged. I'm just as good as anybody in this room. So the framework for me was a way for me to maintain equipoise when people are either trying to push you down or trying to push you up. Because either is dangerous, honestly. To be full of yourself is just as dangerous, I think.
And what you think is valuable, right? It's not necessarily what the other person says. You take what you think is valuable from it and move from there.
Yeah, I think the last thing I would add to it is just to say, so much of your job in life after school is communication, and so little of your education is around communication. There's a massive disparity, particularly in the life sciences. And so as people transition to industry, actually that's one of the first things I talk to folks as they come into our company that are out of their PhDs or postdocs or kind of fresh into the industry of like, you've got a lot of work to do, and what's gotten you from A to B doesn't actually get you from B to C, because so much of how quick you can grow and develop, technical excellence is important. And you can differentiate yourself there, but both your human, your relational, and your communication skills are going to be the things that really propel you at a faster level to higher levels of leadership. And people who are more excellent in that but have a above average level of technical skill traditionally outpace individuals that are truly exceptional on the technical side and that lag on the human or communication side. It's rate limiting at a much faster clip. The other thing I would say is pain's a great teacher, and a lot of what you're taught in academia is about ego. It's about, I'm going to be right, I'm going to have the best ideas, I'm going to be the smartest person in the room. And what's scary when you get into industry is there's some really damn smart people in the room. And so you come in and you make this sort of mistake of you have a strong idea, but it's not loosely held. You're there to prove that you're right. And you're not really curious about, could other people have a different way of looking at it? And the reality is, in most cases, there's lots of different ways of looking at it. But you're kind of young, you're in your career, you want to prove yourself, and you want to prove that you either belong in that room or that you are the smartest person in the room because you feel like that's the right way to get ahead. And the reality is that's about your ego. And at some point, there are a set of experiences that start to chip away at that ego. Right? Like, I will never forget when I was running my firm, I walked in to tell the firm about how we were training one of our top sort of producing employees, and we weren't promoting him, and we spent a lot of time in human capital thinking about how we communicate things. So I felt I was a great communicator. And I get done with the meeting, and sure enough, 5 minutes later, my business partner pulls me outside, and he is livid. And he goes, Brad, my best employee is all up in arms because she feels like now we're promoting this particular person, we're not promoting this other person. I didn't mention that. I didn't communicate around that. And I was rip shit at that point because I was like, you know what, that's not what I said. Right? Like, how am I getting frickin' taken to the cleaners over like this thing when I know what I communicated? I'm a great communicator. And so I talked to my coach, and my coach is like, Brad, he's like, okay, so that happened. Why are you so upset about it? Like, because one way to look at that would be like, so that happened. I know how I did. How could I adjust moving forward? Why are you so upset? And the reality is it attacked the ego I had for myself of, I'm a great communicator. And anytime we experience a loss, we experience hurt. Anger is a secondary emotion of hurt. So now I'm angry because they're attacking this self-conception that I have of me, right? And it takes some of those experiences, whether individually or as you start to move into leadership, where you kind of stamp back, and if you have awareness, you're like, oh shit, I got a lot more stuff I need to work on. And you start becoming more aware. You start trying to create more space for yourself so you can react. Meditation's a great tool at giving you kind of that distance between when something happens and how I respond to it. And you still mess up. You still make mistakes. I still do today. But it's a great teacher. So experience, pain, self-awareness, and focus on communication. Man, that'll be such a great asset.
If you want to be a good leader, ego has to go. Look at Jay-Z. Look what happened when the ego left. Right? Look where he's at when the ego left. But then you look at Diddy, who still has an ego. Look where he's at. He's suing a company he has no equity in. Ciroc. He has no equity, and he's mad. Yeah. Ego.
Kanye.
That's a whole different ego. I ain't touching that, boy.
How do we get the kayak and did it? I don't know what happened. We got last question. While she's teeing it up, I do want to just quickly address imposter syndrome. And so that concept has been around for decades, and other sociologists, social scientists have looked at that concept and had different approaches, different interpretations. And imposter syndrome is really all about you in your head, how I'm perceiving things, and what they essentially demonstrated in their studies was actually it was a manifestation of those structural isms, a good part of it that I just talked about. And so the fact that you don't feel like you belong is because people are actually making you feel that way. Like, this is not something that's made up. It's not about you in your head. It's actually these individuals that are telling you and doing everything they can by ignoring you or whatever it may be to make you feel that way. And so you got to look at that a little different. And I know you didn't ask specifically about like you. But like if a PhD student in the #1 biomedical engineering program said, hey, good Lord, you're here because you are the best of the best, right? And so the me's and all the other folks in BME and other programs, you're the #1 program in the country as a PhD student. We didn't let you in as a favor. We let you in because we knew you were the absolute best, right? All right. Well, thanks. Let's thank our panelists. I know you're going to come and wrap up.